Hello, I'm Andrew White. I'm Paizo's digital product lead. And if you are a virtual tabletop player or just someone who likes to use digital tools to enhance your in-person games, we've got a ton of stuff at PaizoCon this year for you to check out, some of which hopefully you've already gotten to see. We had our online tools showcase yesterday. We had a Roll20 panel this morning. We got all kinds of cool stuff going on the various Discord stages and elsewhere on this very channel, including, I think later on we've got demos from Bissell Brews, Dungeon Alchemist, a bunch of others. I only have an hour to work with here. That's not nearly enough to talk about all the cool new digital stuff that you can look forward to over the next year or so. So I'm just going to focus on a couple. One, our upcoming Monster Core token pack for Foundry Virtual Tabletop with full support for Foundry V12's dynamic token rings. I mentioned that yesterday in the keynote. Two, a full conversion of the standalone module Pray for Death, which we can now tell you will give your PCs a front row seat to the God of War getting ganked by a giant bug. Deluxe module treatment for the Starfinder playtest. We've got some members of the volunteer dev team here with us today who will be talking a bit with us about that later. And all the adventures and org play scenarios, and of course, ongoing support for all upcoming adventure paths. One thing that we did just launch recently that I'm super excited about was our partnership with Michael Gelfi Studios. They're now going to be producing full album-length original soundtracks for our adventure paths going forward. The Seven Dooms for Sandpoint one already came integrated with the Foundry Virtual Tabletop module that we released, and also just yesterday, I believe, just became available on Spotify, and we've got lots more coming. I had the opportunity earlier this week to talk to Michael as well as one of his composers, Philip Melvin, who's been working on the music for us, and of course John Compton and James Jacobs, the lead developers on the Season of Ghosts and Wardens of Wildwood adventure paths. We talked to them about the process of tailoring music to adventure paths, and we've got a segment to play for you on that right now. So let's go to the tape. Hi, I'm Andrew White, Digital Products Lead here at Paizo, and joining us today are our two adventure path development leads, James Jacobs and John Compton, as well as Philip Melvin and Michael Gelfi from Michael Gelfi Studios, who have been composing original music for our adventure paths and will continue to be composing original music for our adventure paths going forward so that we have original soundtracks to go with all of our adventure paths and all of our digital virtual tabletop adventure path modules, which is super exciting. We just recently released the Foundry Virtual Tabletop version of Seven Dooms for Sandpoint with an entire soundtrack already integrated, and we're going to be putting that up on the Paizo store soon as a separate purchase. And as I'm sure that Michael and Philip will be talking to you about soon, the Wardens of Wildwood and Season of Ghosts soundtracks are also well into development, and you should be able to hear those as well soon. So hi guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
Hello.
Yes.
So let's I guess let's start by talking a little bit about what you do and how you do it. And I think that's sort of a question across the board. We can just start with Michael and Philip. How did you get into this? What brought you to composing music for tabletop RPGs, other than the fact that music in tabletop RPGs is awesome?
Philip, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. For me, it was around when I was 26 or 27. I know that's when I discovered TTRPG, World Realm, and I got into that through my friend who introduced me with the person called Christian Svalson, and he's a developer for Black Void. And that was like my first soundtrack I composed for TTRPGs. And before that, I didn't even play Dungeons and Dragons and everything else. But it was really excited for me because that's something new. And before that, I was writing just music for myself and for some, I don't know, couple of trailers and such, and that didn't work well. But after I was done with the soundtrack, I was immediately drawn into this world, and like how the things actually work within the TTRPG community, and I loved it. And ever since then, I was writing music for tabletop games. And a couple of years after, I met Michael, And we started working together, and here we are today.
Nice. So I kept going. So about me, I started playing tabletop games, different TTRPGs when I was 22. A friend got me into it. I was a player. I thought he was not organizing enough games, so I thought, why not becoming the DM myself? And since I love when things are very immersive, I thought, I make music on the side. Let's make my own ambiences because I could not find good ambiences on YouTube. And I made some and I thought, let's share them. And a few years later, we had the largest ambiences channel on YouTube for tabletop games. I was also doing music on the side, but I was really bad at it. It's really not my thing. I mean, comparatively to other composers, I don't have the level for music, but I'm very good at ambiences and sound effects, maybe because it's less figurative and more realistic. That's maybe more in line with my mind. And by the randomness of life, I don't know, I crossed the path of Philip, and I saw the best composer I ever met. I had a lot of respect for what I heard for the guy, and as I always say with Philip, he's very chaotic, but incredibly original in his composition. And I'm not chaotic at all. I love organization, and it was like the opposite meeting, and that really worked. That worked so well. So we started working together. It was one man project, and it turned into MGS. And then Lyre RPG Music joined us, and many other people. We are now about 10. And a few months ago, we released Opus, which is a new tabletop audio management tool for Dungeon Masters. That was the last step of our development, creating our own tool. And since we have the largest tabletop audio library available, we thought we needed to put that into a tool. So yep, that's the whole path. I hope it was not too chaotic.
Cool.
The explanation, I mean.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using music when I'm GMing games. I will often spend many hours putting together long, elaborate playlists of music stolen from various soundtracks for every possible event. Like, oh, this is a combat. What if this combat takes place in a cave? What if this combat takes place at sea? Ooh, this would be a cool track to play for the big bad evil guy who I assume will definitely show up and have plenty of time to monologue before the players immediately start attacking them. But never happens. Yeah, it's something I enjoy doing, even though in actual practice it very rarely works out the way that I intend for it to do. But that's kind of GMing in a nutshell. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. James and John, I'd be curious to know what your experience is using music in your games, whether they're games that you're running or games that you're playing in, or just in general, your thoughts on music and TTRPGs.
Cool. I've always loved using music in RPGs, not necessarily during the game itself, but when I'm writing an adventure or creating content, I love having music in the background. It kind of inspires me. I will often pick like specific composers or soundtracks for movies or such to help, guide my inspiration when I'm creating stuff. I did use a sort of a musical puzzle once back in college where I had my little synthesizer keyboard and I used a Sharpie because you could wipe these off the plastic keys. But I drew like magic runes on all of the keys, and then the player characters had to figure out which song to play to cause these bells to ring in this underground cavern to open up a door, and they had to like pick up these different compositions throughout the place.
It's always
And then
Funky Town, right?
yeah,
Always
yeah.
good.
And always just using music in games as part of the storyline, like in the Song of Silver in Hell's Rebels is a song that you have to learn and perform in order to give your PCs advantages over the devils and the evil in the air. I guess Bard is my favorite character class, so that's also a big part of it. I didn't really start using music as like an accompaniment in games I was running until I started playing with other folks like Wes Schneider and Chris Young's and a couple other folks really used it well. Wes in particular had this really great stunt where he'd use music, just to set the ambience, like gothic music for a horror game or something like that. And he would have all of these different tracks picked out for different encounters and stuff. But the thing that really impressed me with what he was using it for, every game you run, there's going to be a point where everybody's chatting or looking on their phones or distracted or not really paying attention to what you, the GM, are trying to do and set things up. And he would just sit back and let us talk for a little bit. And he would slowly use his remote control to turn up the soundtrack on the volume, turn it up slowly but surely until everybody started realizing, well, there's creepy music coming from somewhere. What's going on? And it would focus everybody on him, and then he could turn the music down and take over the game again. And it was a really subtle way to not only get everyone's attention, but also set a mood for an upcoming encounters.
He also had something where he was able to blend tracks into one another pretty effectively. So you wouldn't even necessarily know when the background music was changing until like 10 seconds later, when it would catch up to your brain and be like, oh, hang on.
Yeah, he was really good at it.
Yeah. He's definitely one of the inspirations that I've had early on for using music in gaming. And James's point about the musical puzzle is also really exciting, because we deal with a lot of verbal cues with some visual grid-based cues when it comes to RPGs. And when you can have puzzles or any experience start to incorporate other senses, whether that's a musical puzzle or whether that's like handing out a tactile thing or some sort of handout, then it engages not only your players on a deeper level, but it can also engage some of the players who are more tuned to certain cues in a way that they might not otherwise get. And so, like, I've a player in one of my regular games that has aphantasia, where she can't visualize things based on description. She has to see an image. But, some other stuff can perfectly work well to inspire or evoke emotions within her. And so music can be one of those cues. As far as I'm concerned, I came from an RPG background of like putting down some pencils on a table to act as walls. And so like I'm an ad lib GM at heart. And the idea of pre-printing out maps or coming up with a long playlist of songs is difficult for me. But I did experiment a little bit with like Sirenscape, for example, in setting up like wilderness soundtracks and sound effects, and kind of using that same Wes effect that James referenced of like slowly turning up the volume or frequency of certain things to signal that, oh, that roaring dinosaur that you've been hearing in the background for the past hour of gameplay, it's louder than it was before. The other thing that I'll kind of bring up early on that maybe we can get into a little bit later is that because I'm kind of an improv or focus on verbal communication GM, music has oftentimes been something that's difficult for me to incorporate into games, partly because it's one more thing for me to juggle as a GM, and some GMs are a lot better than others, but also because I have done a lot of my gaming in organized play settings at conventions where it's loud, where you don't necessarily have a good internet connection, where even if you set up a subwoofer under the table, it might not actually convey the music to your 6-foot wide table because of all the background noise. So it's only in the past few years that I've really been doing more home gaming of late that I can control that environment and make the most of music.
Cool. Yeah, I have also tried to incorporate music into games at conventions by trying to play it on my phone. And even if it wasn't incredibly loud around there, the awkwardness of being able to like recently just lean over and tap something out of your phone and try and find the track and whatever is it's less than ideal. That's another benefit, actually, I think, of playing in a virtual environment, is that in a lot of virtual tabletops, there is some sort of player for music that's already built in, and especially the stuff that we've been producing ourselves, we make a point of making it so that all of those tracks are at your fingertips, so that when a battle begins or you enter a scene that specifically has music that was designed to accompany it, you don't have to go digging around or anything. You can just play it automatically. James, you mentioned that you enjoy playing music as while you are developing some of these adventures or doing the writing. I'd be curious to know whether or not whether those are the same thematic influences that also drive your thoughts on what would be good music to accompany that action at the table? We all had meetings together prior to Philip and Michael starting to work on these soundtracks, where we talked about influences and inspirations and general sort of thematic overarching themes of the adventures that we were being worked on that they thought would translate well into music and other movie soundtracks and musical works that accomplish a similar goal. I'm just wondering, I'd be interested in hearing more about your thoughts on how that process works, really from all of you, because these are meetings that we all had together, and I was mostly sitting on the sidelines for them, just letting you guys rip off of each other. And it was fascinating just hearing some of this stuff.
It's traditionally I'd pick something like this nostalgic or something that I'm really familiar with. Like Duran Duran is a big from growing up in the 80s. Movie soundtracks, particularly stuff by like John Carpenter, that's really strong on the ambience and just the sort of almost the trance-like element of the electronic stuff. Helps me just to focus, but it's also the music that I enjoy so much and I'm so familiar with. The soundtrack to Conan is a great example that shows up every time you see it seems when somebody's playing a fantasy game with music enabled. But that sort of just kind of tunes out like the outer world of distraction and helps me just focus on things. But I have done things like when I was working on Seven Dunes for Sandpoint with this Sandpoint illustration behind me. When I was working on that one, I did bring up some music to listen to that had more of a sort of I guess I don't know what I'd call it, but just like the creepy, epic dungeon crawling theme. Again, the Conan soundtrack obviously is one that plays into it, but other soundtracks for movies like Bernard Herrmann's Descent into the Depths or A Journey to the Center of the Earth was a great soundtrack. It's got a lot of brass and just big, loud, echoing noises make it feel like you're in a cavern underground. I was also going to mention Descent in other movies where it's like you're crawling around in the underground and everything's like kind of this creepy sort of vibe. And it really helps me to, if I'm familiar with the music, it's not distracting while I'm writing, but it's also just music just inspires so much in my personal creativity, because I just can visualize like an encounter playing out to a certain theme or something like that. Now that I've listened to some of the soundtracks you guys have created for Season of Ghosts and Seven Dunes for Sandpoint, it's sort of a chicken and the egg situation, where it would be interesting to get one of these soundtracks completed before we even start working on it, which I don't know how we would even do that, but having that, kind of guide the creation process would be an interesting experiment. But that's pretty tricky, for a lot of reasons.
I've got an idea.
Oh.
An adventure path specifically designed where everybody is puppets. And the whole goal is that the musical soundtrack is devised before anybody starts writing any of the adventures. And all of the puppets have to literally dance to the tune that you've established ahead of time.
Nice. There's also, like I mentioned earlier, the song of Silver, but we've also done other songs. Like the Goblin song was one of the first things I wrote for Pathfinder way back in the day. Or there's a song that I created for a character in Crimson Throne. And I've always loved poetry and writing song lyrics and stuff like that. Even though I'm not really good at like composing the actual music to it. It's just a really fun way to engage a part of my brain that isn't the more technical element of like, here's this encounter, here's what's going on. You don't really get a lot of chance aside from maybe read aloud text to really engage in the lyrical part of the writing. I try to infuse a lot of that into the writing itself so that when a GM's reading an encounter, they're being entertained by just beautiful, as I can make it, language that makes it more fun for them and inspire them. But when you get to things like poetry or songs or things that you find in world, it's a different sort of creativity that I really enjoy exploring. And having some of those songs and such put to music. I wrote several of them for the sidebars in the Big Absalom book, for example. And I always have in my head like this song kind of is sung to a certain established lyric, and then I kind of keep that quiet because that's copyrighted material, and I don't want folks going around singing the Goblin song to a specific song that is very recognizable. But it's fun, and just looking at different types of music. Like I was writing back in the Dragon magazine days, would write little poems for all these demon articles, like Dagon got a sea shanty, and Kostuchikai got a sort of an old-timey Beowulf epic, and it's just a great way in a short amount of time to convey a really powerful emotion. And music does that so much better, I think, because it can get to you through, your ears while you're focusing on the visuals of what's going on. And it can be subtle or overwhelming. And yeah, it's just exciting seeing us work with you guys to get these soundtracks going.
Then I have, I think, a good news, because you spoke about the song from the Crimson Throne, and Philip actually composed a soundtrack to it, to actually a song, the Spirit Song. I think that's the name. Yep, he made a song. He recorded it a few years ago, but it was just out of a pure fan project, and we still have the song, and we do plan to share it now that we can do it.
He did share it with me. It's pretty cool. It's wild hearing something like this. Like, that sounds really good.
Yeah, but it was never meant to happen. I was just conversing with my friends who had an actual podcast of Crimson Throne, and they asked me just one day, "Hey, what do you feel about doing this song?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's do that." And it ended up like the actual song. And like Michael mentioned, it's really it's really exciting that we had the opportunity to release that now. I mean, for the audience to hear the song. Yeah.
Can we say next month? We can release it for next month, Philip, right? I think so.
Whenever you want. I've done my part.
It's a great example of just how collaborative the whole process is, where it's like you get different people with different strengths, and they create something that I think is greater than the sum of its parts. And it's a case of like where I think we're all like we've been impressing each other and inspiring each other. So it's good that I'm excited to bring this to just folks who want to listen to music, either if it's just listening it to while they're writing or on a drive or as part of the game.
Yeah. That's something that's so widespread in the TTRPG community in general. That's my feeling. I never had any negative experience in that regard. I feel like we all enrich each other artistically through all the different creations we found out. It's crazy how you can just take any adventure for almost any TTRPG, and you find people who made some fan content, or just passion content that improve your experience for any kind of preference you have. So if you're into music, you find music. If you're into car maps, you find maps. And the quality and pure genius of some creations. I'm not speaking about MGS. I'm speaking in general. It's not. It's mind-boggling knowing that even some of these people are not even professional. They just do that on the side, and they can just create amazing things. And the opportunity that's for MGS we had to make these as our jobs is only thanks to the community and to people like you at Paizo, who recognize hard work and want to create a great project together. It's so good. It feels amazing.
Yeah, I think it's cool also just how heavily ingrained with the tropes that are at the roots of TTRPGs these kinds of musical inclusions are. Like if you go back to The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, they're singing all the time. There's there's all kinds of poems and songs and marching songs and exploration songs, and every version of The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or something that's ever been put to film has its own interpretations of those.
Even the word.
I realize there are differing opinions on the original, like Rankin Bass version of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but you got to admit, you go back and you listen to some of those. There's some great music in there, like the original. Certainly a very different from our Goblin song, but the musical version of the initial Goblin song when the goblins show up in the Misty Mountains. has basically been stuck in my head for 30 plus years because it just fits perfectly, I think. I wanted to talk to you guys also specifically. You mentioned that. So obviously, if you're composing music for a movie soundtrack or a predetermined narrative of some kind, you obviously know exactly when the high points are, when specific events are going to occur that you have a particular theme to go with. How do you go about composing music that by definition has to accompany actions that are wildly unpredictable? You may know certainly where certain events are likely to happen. You can compose a theme for an area. You can compose a theme for a specific NPC. And combat music, I think in general, you can probably compose for. But how do you design music to accompany events that you can't foresee?
Okay, well, from my point of perspective, it was always like this. I never actually wrote like I need to have like a combat song or an exploration song. Usually I tell a story, and sometimes I think that you can't satisfy everyone's opinion. We get a lot of those comments like, hey, this song shouldn't be the exploration, this could be combat. I mean, it's up to you. You can use it however you want. But for me, it's much easier if I have some context, like in this case, when I read some of your adventures, and when I compose the song for it. But usually, I just, go with the flow, and, I expect for the best. I can't really explain it, but I think it's just an intuition, and I think that all of us creators feel the same in our specific niches, of our line of work. And the feedback is always important. If you're working for someone or with someone, to go back and forth to establish how the song, the final product will work. What to get. And so far, I can only say that usually many of my songs were just complete and they worked. And I don't know. I just rely on my intuition and I hope for the best. There's nothing more to it actually. But I'm certain that some of our other composers, colleagues would have the other experiences, and work processes. So yeah.
If I may add to that, Philip, you also take into account, by example, the culture of the people that would be involved in specific combats or scenarios. By example, if there's a likely combat between the NPCs and, let's say, goblins, you take into account who are these goblins, how they live, what's their technological level, that kind of stuff, to select your instrument and the rhythm and the amount of complexity you add to the song. That's funny because you speak from intuition point of view, and I think these elements, you just made them yours, and it's really hard to translate that as words because your medium to share these feelings is music, and that's how you can express them best. Where writers would write paragraphs about how they select the words they selected, and yeah, I like this. Sorry, I lose my words in English, but you get my point. It's a personal bias.
As you said, we best communicate through music, and it was for me always the medium through what I can actually communicate with people. And it's very difficult to explain my work process. But as you mentioned, yeah, the intuition, like I mentioned, it's important, but also the experience. Like I've been composing music for 15 years now, and I've heard so many goblins, so many orc songs, and I just use that and like transcribe into my own idea, and then the things happen. I don't know. It's just like that. But yeah.
But I like what you said about subjectivity for the DMs and players. That's something I see a lot on not so much, but I see on comments on our YouTube videos. For example, when I make ambiences are more realistic and less figurative than music. For example, if I add the sounds of ghosts in the background, some people would say ghosts should be more ethereal, or ghosts should be, we should be able to understand what they say. And you have different opinions, and it's based on the setting the players and DMs are usually playing in and their own understanding of it. And since all of you are dungeon masters, you know that we all have a different way of playing an adventure. Even though the adventure is thoroughly described and yeah, described in so many details, we still do things differently, and our players do things differently. And so ultimately you have to find the common ground, maybe the more in the middle line to please everyone, and then you do variations if you can for your tracks. For music it's a bit harder, but
yeah. What helps a lot about that is actually that, you know, our community through Patreon and all that, when you have the community of you know, your own people, your own players that that can give you the references, you know, and ideas every month. So you built your workflow around that, you know, and you know exactly what to write the next month and what's going to be satisfactory to your own players and your communities. So yeah, but you can't satisfy everyone, you know, when it comes to that. I mean, like, but that's the beauty of this, you know. I'm not going to say job, because this is for me a pleasure, you know, a hobby that I do for a living, and it's incredible. But you know, you just have to go for it, and you know, without risking it, there's nothing's going to happen. And you know, yeah.
Well, from what we've heard so far, I think it absolutely speaks for itself. I think that anybody who's gotten a chance to take a look at the Seven Dooms for Sandpoint Foundry virtual tabletop module has already heard that music. And as soon as we get that up on the store, possibly by now, maybe we'll have it up on the store by now, right now during PaizoCon. I'll tell you as soon as we get back to the live segment.
One of the things that
it's fantastic work, and I can't wait to hear more of it.
One of the things I'll add to your earlier question, Andrew, because it sounded like you were kind of asking about pacing as well. And what I've found is that I will have kind of some ambient background things I can just let play for, you know, an hour straight and not worry about it. But when I'm planning out any music or the like, I'm thinking about what those scene changes in that movie would be. Because as you said, yeah, your movie, you'll know that 34 seconds into the scene is when this climax happens, or, you know, crescendo, yada, yada, yada. And you can't do that when you're waiting for somebody at the table to add up the dice of their fireball spell and hope that they get it done in time, because in the next minute and 13 seconds, the second round should really be starting, because that's when the music changes. And so think about what the high points are when you want to start that musical change, and kind of plan toward that. So the start of a scene happens, you got 3 minutes of music stuff, and when it runs out, or it repeats, or whatever. That should be fine. It could even be the sort of thing where I would say, okay, I have this read aloud text that's coming up, and I know that I've timed myself, it's going to be, you know, 1:14 to read through it. So I've decided that when I read this word is when I'm going to click the mouse button and start this other track, because I know that it'll follow the pacing of the part of the game that I do control, which is that block of read aloud text and that unified presentation moment. And then once all the players and whatnot are doing their own things, then all the timing is off. And I just kind of have to let the music do its own thing or fade away now that it's done its thing. And as a GM, you just can't control the pacing any more than that.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us here. Again, all this stuff is going to be available, either is or will soon be available on our website at Paizo.com. And the Seven Dooms for Sandpoint module and Wardens of Wildwood and Season of Ghosts modules are all available for Foundry Virtual Tabletop on Paizo.com right now. And the music for 2 of those will be available soon, and the music for 1 of them already is. So yeah, I want to thank Michael and Philip and John and James for joining us. That was awesome. I think we all could have talked for a whole lot longer. And I look forward to having future conversations with you once we start getting to Curtain Call and Triumph of the Tusk.
We didn't
Thanks
even
for
get
the
to
invitation.
Yeah.
we didn't
Thank
even get
Thanks,
to the
everyone.
puppet campaign idea. You got to run the campaign where every single player doesn't have a background. You only give them a musical track that you give them no context for. But throughout the course of the campaign, you'll occasionally play it when they're close to something that's important to their unknown backstory.
There's
There's
something I threw into the Curtain Call Player's Guide that suggests, since that's the adventure path where you create an opera, when you're creating your characters, you should pick a theme song for your character.
Who's going to write that music?
It's going to be fun when we get to that for sure. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Great talking with you.
And we're back, or we're live again, I guess, since we didn't go anywhere. Well, thanks to the magic of that panel having been recorded a week ago, we now have two exciting new developments to announce. Number one is we absolutely are doing that theme music thing for the Curtain Call virtual tabletop module. We will absolutely be somehow finding some way to let you give your player characters theme music, and ideally giving you the ability to tie them to buffs or something, just like James was suggesting. It's going to be awesome. The other thing is that the track that Michael mentioned, the Spirit Song, actually for Curse of the Crimson Throne, is now available for download. And can we throw the URL up on the screen real quick? If you go to that URL right now, you can download that free track, Spirit Song, from Michael Gelke Studios for Curse of the Crimson Throne right now as a free sample, as just another example of all the awesome music we look forward to for all of our other adventure paths now and in the future. So go check that out. But right now, I have we're lucky enough to be joined by three of the devs from the volunteer dev team who works on both the Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the upcoming Starfinder 2nd Edition system for Foundry Virtual Tabletop. That would be Shark That Walks Like a Man, Spartan CPA, and Tikale. Hey guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So yeah, basically, first of all, I just want to thank you in general on behalf of both Paizo and the community for all the fantastic work that you've done on making the Pathfinder 2e system for Pathfinder Virtual Tabletop. It is really incredible. I think everybody here who has tried that out knows that. And the products that we make, the Adventure Path modules that we make would not be possible without all of the awesome polish and automation that you built into that system. I just wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about some of your experiences making that. Just sort of generally thoughts on where development's going, stuff you've enjoyed doing. So I guess just we'll start with you, Shark, just in general. What are some features of the system that you're particularly proud of? There's a lot to go on there, but what's if you had to pick out one, what's your most favorite?
Yeah, that is hard to answer. I mainly just go from one mini obsession to the next. Looking back, it's pretty technical, but we rewrote and re-implemented a dice parser for handling damage rolls in the Pathfinder system, and that enabled us to get in a lot of features that we wanted to. We have pretty damage roll displays now, where you can see all the damage types, and integrated that with immunities, weaknesses, and resistances. That was a lot of fun to do, and I was pretty pleased with the result. There are still edge cases. There probably always will be, especially the closer we drill down, the more reality, I guess, starts to pull itself apart, and you're like, okay, this will probably never happen, but it's possible. And what is the answer? We don't know.
never assume that it's never going to happen. Because we will find a way to make it happen the moment that you assume that.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that most recently.
Yeah. So how about you guys? How about the other guys? Are you proud of anything in particular? I'm talking about like could be core system functionality, could just be like a random quality of life improvement, anything like that.
I'm personally proud of our coverage of the monsters and the bestiaries, all of the NPCs that are in any source that we have published by Paizo for Pathfinder Second Edition are baked into the system, and the way that the code leads have structured the rule elements really allows us to do a lot of automation that is really core and unique to Foundry Virtual Tabletop. So I'm kind of proud that we can provide specifically more automation. A lot of people would really expect us with that.
I'm deeply impressed that you always remember to improve, to add literally anything. So if we put out a blog with a bunch of dumb April Fool's Day monsters, those will be in there like within 48 hours usually. I have no idea how much any of those have ever been played in anything, but it's good to have them as the option.
I will let Kale talk about the April Fool's Day monsters because those were actually the first monsters he contributed to the system.
Yeah, that was my very first contribution, was looking at the blog content and realizing, hey, this is all licensed. There's no reason we don't have it. And so that was the very first thing I did, was putting in, DMOM and non sequitur.
Yeah, fantastic. You're doing the Lord's work there, guys. So on a similar note, I guess, what are some of the most challenging rules or system components or things like that you've had to integrate in the system? I will say that we were talking a little bit about this earlier. There are occasionally I'll be reading through something or writing something and thinking like, well, it'll be interesting to see how they pull this off. Here's a thing that does one kind of damage under these circumstances and a different kind of damage under these circumstances, and the damage adds up in a totally different way if both of those circumstances are true. Here's a creature that's only visible to this particular type of vision. They'll figure it out somehow. What are some of the more challenging ones that you had to deal with there?
I guess you can divide up these challenges into two broad groups. There are rules ambiguities. This wasn't the Pathfinder rules weren't written to be run by a computer program. They were written to be read by a human and interpreted. So sometimes, we'll come across something we're not sure. We search around to see if there's a consensus. That's not guaranteed. We try to tease out some insight from designer commentary that isn't always present. That one, and ultimately sometimes we just have to make a decision, or if we're really unsure, make both decisions and provide an option to switch back and forth depending on what you, the GM, thinks is probably right. There are other ones where the rules are clear, and it's just a tactical challenge. Tracking, for example, detection statuses among an entire n-dimensional matrix of creatures in a scene, where one is rolling stealth. That result has to be checked against everyone, and this stealthy creature may now be hidden to some, undetected to others, observed by some. Tracking that is something that we don't have yet. Spend a lot of time sitting on the can thinking about how I'm going to do, and it'll happen. It's hard.
It's a really tricky thing to manage outside of a virtual tabletop, honestly. So you guys can
in the flesh realm, especially with Pathfinder 1E, and I was like, how did we do that back then? I don't remember being all that concerned about it. So we had to have some solution, right? But yeah, not sure.
Well, assuming is currently playing a sniper gunslinger in a game that is on Foundry Virtual Tabletop. I look forward to that being figured out.
I think
How about the rest of you guys? Is there anything in particular that jumps out where we made your lives unnecessarily difficult for no particular reason, but you still managed to overcome it?
from a data entry side, sometimes we read some of these monster stat blocks, and we're like, we can't do that yet, but we have to. But Tikale and I have to sit here and determine a way to tag the features so that if we can do it in the future, it will just work going forward, and we don't have to go searching through 5,000 NPCs. I think Tikale said there were 5,850 NPCs in the system as of yesterday.
5,048.
5,000. But for instance, the terrain expertise or a number of monsters who have a +1 to their stealth if they're in an area that is snowing. That is not something that has been able to be done in Foundry so far. But with V12 just coming out over the last couple of days, we've been tweaking with scene regions a little bit, and we put in a couple of teasers in our Foundry Discord about having some potential support for scene regions to tag the terrain as snowy, so that then our automation, which we've been doing the whole time, will say they're in this little box on the map, they get a +1 to stealth.
So I can just mark off part of my map as this is the snowy area, or this is the swampy area, or whatever, and it will automatically know if I have the appropriate feats or whatever to give me skill bonuses or adjust my movement speed accordingly.
That is a feature we're looking at supporting in V12.
That's the kind of ridiculous overkill that I and probably many other players absolutely appreciate.
Yeah, I think if we figure out we can do it, we're like, well, I guess we got it. There's no choice here.
It's true. That's never led anywhere bad. Discovering that you can and then immediately forging ahead without deciding whether or not you should. Absolutely. So do you decide on prioritizing features like this based on experiences in games that you're playing in or running in, or how do you choose? Or is it simply based on like, whoa, something just changed in the core software that actually makes this possible? Like you were just saying, now obviously we have no choice but to do it. How do you choose what kind of things to work on next?
I think it's a mix of looking at what's soon to come out. There's just been, I guess, a life motif since working on this of getting my subscriber copy of a PDF and looking at something and saying, oh God, how are we going to do that? And just getting cracking, thinking about it. If we decide we can't do something as well as we would like in time, giving like the best effort solution in place. So there's that. I do play in a campaign every week. I'm playing Bloodlords right now. Lots of fun. And my character is a psychic. I was sort of annoyed that there was a module made by TKL. I had to persuade my GM to install that module, and it's still a module. It's never going to feel like, I guess, a first class feature. So eventually, I wanted this to work better and more fluid for myself, and got working on that. I also do Pathfinder Society. Sometimes I do that just to play a character I wouldn't normally play, so that I could suffer through it until I can go back and make it a better experience for myself.
Cool. Spartan, Tikale, how about you guys?
I've been answering too much, so Tikale, take this one.
Yeah, like I definitely, I wanted to, my next character that I want to play as whenever I'm no longer the forever GM is going to be a psychic, and so, I I helped out a lot with the psychic automation and figuring out how to actually get that implemented. And I'm currently running gatewalkers for my group, and so in the lead up to that, I thought, well, I want my group to be able to use these deviant powers, and so that meant I had to sit down and figure out how to how to actually implement deviant powers in the system, and mute my phone. And then that's fine. Like they're a pain to automate because there's a lot of moving parts in them. And then you all had to go and just last week release a book with 2 new deviant powers in it.
I was just going to say, your timing was perfect on that.
Yeah. So I'd set this precedent of automating these deviant powers, and now I've got these 2 new deviant powers I've got to sit down and automate. So that was fun. I like them. Thank you for those. I enjoy getting a weird challenge, especially when it's something we can actually do and not, where it looks like I'm like, well, that is purely the GM's call. So all best we can do is a little toggle.
Well, what I hear is that we should continue adding random, needlessly complicated stuff just to continue giving your lives meaning. And I think we can probably rise to that challenge.
As I look at the grades, we actually do wonder sometimes, like, do they have secret meetings where they just plan out how to mess with us?
I can't confirm or deny that. But so yeah, I guess just only have a few minutes left here, which is probably good because we need to tread very carefully here to avoid giving away anything special. For the last few months, you guys have been working on the super secret Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest system, which will be released as a full-fledged module at PaizoCon 2024 in August. And it's going to be awesome. I don't know if you guys got to see the playtest session that Thirsty ran yesterday, but it's a really cool system. Without giving anything away that will cause Thirsty to come to my house and kill me, what is your favorite thing that you've gotten to work on, or the cool feature that you see being necessitated by a change in Starfinder 2E that's going to be coming to the system?
I'm gonna go last. I have an elderly cat who's in a random room talking at the ceiling. So,
well, that takes the wind out of myself a little bit because I was hoping Shark would talk about how we would integrate the 2 systems together. But I'm excited to see what we do to get Starfinder working with Pathfinder and Pathfinder working with Starfinder as compatible as the systems are going to be. I've taken a look at some of the stuff that we have, and all of it looks great. So I'm excited to get it working.
I'm going to be honest, that's one of the most exciting things that I'm looking forward to as well, is I think that I'm glad that we're taking the approach of keeping both of the systems unique, but I love the possibility for crossover where you can storm the Abomination vaults as a talking jar of gas. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay to say this because they mentioned it on stream yesterday, but I'm really excited for people to see that crab spell.
Yes. There's they've outdone themselves, I think, with taking the spells up to the level, right up to the border of ridiculous, and then refusing to stop there and just continuing to go an extra few levels. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. I think we all are looking forward to how we have a current plan, or our current plan for implementing these 2 different game systems with all this different content. I think is really exciting. Shark, you want to talk about that?
not really. Yeah, that's going to be an undertaking. One thing I am very excited about, though, I remember Thurston Hillman commenting on how merely doing some fundamental rebalancing, keeping all the mechanics and doing some fundamental rebalancing can make for a very radically different experience. And I believe him. I think that's true for things like putting a keen emphasis on range combat. and I really look forward to seeing that. That's an exciting prospect for me. Thinking about cover in a whole different way.
Like covering a thing about range and just sort of generally how maps are laid out is, I think, is going to be probably one of the biggest changes, because I do know that there are some complaints that people have sometimes about official maps being cramped in such a way that makes ranged combat a little bit more difficult than it would be, just because in general, when you're playing Pathfinder, ranged combat is an option, but melee options are sort of the default if there is one. So it'll be certainly interesting to see how that changes. Things like that, and the increased prevalence of flight at earlier levels, all that type of stuff. Yeah, just in general, I think since I know people have asked, the general approach, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when the systems are complete, there will be a Pathfinder system and there will be a Starfinder system. And each of those systems will also have an add-on module which adds content from the other system into that system. So if you want to play pure Pathfinder or pure Starfinder, you certainly can. But if you want to play Pathfinder and add mechs or cybernetics or something like that, you can just activate that module and toggle that option on.
We're kicking around ideas for, I guess, the nitty gritty detail of it, but it will be two separate systems. They'll probably have a shared like central code base, and things will be built on top of that. So there'll be kind of an asterisk finder thing that won't be, it'll be almost a system, and then we'll fill out the rest of the system on top of that. And for Starfinder, maybe we'll, I don't know, throw in like the part of player 4 in there as your kind of basic old-timey accoutrements. And if you want the rest, yeah, there'll be modules for it to make your Starfinder more Pathfindery.
Yeah, and to be clear, the playtest that is coming out in August, that will still just be a module for the Pathfinder system.
Yes.
Yeah.
The actual system will be separate until the actual system.
Yeah. The existing Starfinder field test module will be updated with all the new data, and we'll try to make that as nice as possible with the time we have.
Right. Well, we're up against our time, so I want to thank you guys again for all the fantastic work that you guys have done making Pathfinder 2nd Edition and soon Starfinder 2nd Edition as polished and amazing as it is on the Foundry virtual tabletop platform. And I'm just super excited to see what you do next.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot, guys. And I believe coming up next, we're moving on to the Whimsy and TTRPGs panel. So stick around for that.
Foundry Virtual Tabletop presents